everybody. It's Victor Dantas here. Today, this is lesson 4 of the Zero to Hero presentation. Today, we have the pleasure and honor to host the star of the show, Thomasz Poszitek. And before the end of my life, I will be sure to say his last name properly. I promise I'll make it a mission to get there. But Thomas, thank you so much for dedicating your time and freeing up your calendar for this lesson and next week's as well. It's really great to have you over. Today, I believe you're going to talk about approvals in Power Automate. The floor is yours, my friend. Take it away.
All right. So, hello everyone. I usually start with good morning, good afternoon, and good evening because I bet we are spread around the world. So, uh, where I am now, it is 8 p.m., so quite late. However, it doesn't matter because we are all here gathered to learn about Power Automate. So, I'm really as well excited to be part of this initiative that Victor is conducting. So this is episode season 3, right? Now we are focusing on Power Automate and its features, its functionalities. And I decided to talk about approvals during this hour, during this session, because I personally think that approvals is one of the most important and desired by business actually feature that we can find in Power Automate. So one of the biggest differences between Logic Apps and Power Automate is that Power Automate is that workflow platform to create business workflows, whereas Logic Apps is mostly for like integration and things. And so when speaking about the business workflows, where we have some logic, where we have attendees, where we have employees somehow participating in that workflow, one of the most often asked feature is actually an approval. So the business would like to have stages, would like to have steps where they can express approval, rejection, or some kind of the fact that they reviewed a document or an item. They would like to have workflows where someone is creating a request and then others are approving it or rejecting and so on and so on. So Power Automate does have approvals, and approvals is really an important feature that you should really know well how to use it and how it works. And so here we are in this group of experts around Power Automate. So today is me. You already, I think, had the pleasure with Eliza. You will also meet Mariano and Kent and Yash as well. And thank you, Victor, once again for organizing it. So just a few words about myself. My name is Thomasz Poszitek. Don't try to spell my last name, or if you're from Slavic countries, it will be easier. But if you're from all over the world, it's really difficult. So don't worry, it's really hard to pronounce. And I'm working with Power Automate for like over 4 years. I think it's even 5 years. So like I started with Power Automate whenever it was released from the private preview and reached the public preview. But before working Power Automate, I've been working with Nintex and SharePoint workflows. So this area of business automation was somehow with me since the beginning of my career with Microsoft products, which is, I think, 11 years ago, or sort of. Anyway, if you'd like to connect with me, if you'd like to see what I'm working on, what I'm writing about, or recording videos, I highly encourage you to go to my YouTube and subscribe, because this is where I'm focusing right now mostly. Then go into this aka.ms/Poszitek URL. There should be a spotlight present. Sorry. That's another thing that's somehow just gone, is gone. So anyway, does it work? Yeah, now it works. Not work. I need this feature in a moment, so it better be working. Okay, so there is this URL, aka.ms/Poszitek. Under this URL, you will find all the hyperlinks to the social media channels where I'm present at, so don't hesitate, go and subscribe. Okay, enough about myself. Let's go now to the agenda. And so I decided to split this whole presentation into several topics, into several pieces, actually 5. the sixth one is just to make this whole slide a bit organized. So first we're going to talk about the basics, the general information. Then I'll introduce you to the types of approvals, so what kind of approvals we have in Power Automate. Then I'll tell you how we can extend those basic approvals with Microsoft Teams and actually where in Microsoft Teams approvals are present. Then we'll talk about long-running approvals, because that happens as well very often, that when a business is requiring to build them a workflow with an approval, it quite soon turns out that their approvals are not being completed like within days, but they quite likely are running over months. And in Power Automate, what you will learn, we have a limit on how long can a single Power Automate wait for an action to be completed. And therefore, knowing some basic patterns around long-running approvals is also a very good thing to know. And lastly, I'll show you a little bit about administration, so how to work with raw data of approvals, where this data actually resists, and how you can modify it, and how to actually, well, administer that information. And then demos, I will be doing all the way around. So with everything I'll be talking about, I'll try to supplement it with demos as well. And I hope I will really fit in time we have. And anyway, Victor, is it okay if I, go beyond the time that we have, like a couple of minutes?
For sure, yeah.
All right. So let's start with basics. I decided to first start with the architecture so that you understand how actually Flow works with approvals, and actually not only Flow, but Teams as well. So basically, there are several tables in Dataverse that are being used to store information that is created around approvals. First table, the Flow approval, is actually used to store a very, very general information about every approval, like who created it and when. Now, in the approval table, that one is really taking part in every approval action or in every approval process. And this table stores general information about every approval process that has been initiated. So in approval, you will find information about who created approval, what is the title of the approval, what is the description of the approval, what is a link to a related item or items, and also if that approval can be reassigned and if there should be a notification sent to email. Now, an approval can be assigned to one or more people, and then every assignee, so like every task that is being created, is stored in approval requests. So table called approval request is actually holding every single task created in that approval process that has been initiated. And then in approval request, you will find information like to whom this specific task is assigned, when it was assigned, and what is its status. And then in the end, there is also approval response. So the table that stores information about the outcomes. So whenever a task is completed, approved, rejected, or any custom outcome is being selected and submitted. And then in approval responses, you will find information about the outcomes of completed tasks, together with information like comments, when it was completed, and by whom. And I also put here this table called user, because this is where actually is coming the information about all actors in approval process. So let it be an approver, the initiator or the assignee. All information is actually coming from this table. It is not coming from Active Directory directly. So with that said, all information around approvals is kept within the Dataverse. And now what is important as well is that this information, those approvals, are stored per environment. So if you create a flow in default environment, all approvals, all requests, all tasks actually are going to be stored within tables in that environment, and they won't be visible if you switch to another environment, right? So I'll just show you in a moment that like tasks are accessible per environment where they were created. Okay, so how can we actually create or assign a task? We have like two major ways, two major possibilities, or options to create them. So first, obviously, you can go to Power Automate and create a workflow that has an action that creates a task. Or we can use a modern tasks feature in Microsoft Teams, and there we can create a task either using a conversation. So within a conversation in a chat, we can create an approval. It can be either in private conversation or in a channel conversation. Or we can as well go into approvals application in Microsoft Teams and then create a task directly in there. The point is that no matter which way we choose, the tasks are going to be stored in the same Dataverse structure as I showed you before. There are some small differences between tasks created by Power Automate and tasks created in Microsoft Teams. For example, in Microsoft Teams, there are no notifications to email being sent. In Power Automate, you can decide whether you want to send a notification or not. And so those are those two major ways that we can create a task. And so how can we do that in Power Automate? Well, basically, when you go to a designer and you type approval, you will find 3 actions that you can use. So first, you can create an approval. So this action only creates approval but doesn't wait for the approval to be completed. Then if you choose this first action and then you want to have another one that waits for approval, then you have to put somewhere in your logic the second action. This can be useful, for example, when you want to first create approval, then get it details and save it somewhere. And then you want to wait actually for the approval to be completed. Therefore, you have 2 actions, and then between them, you can create a lot of logic that is going to somehow help you in this process. Or if you have a very simple approval, you can just use this third action that is called start and wait for an approval. And this way you will just create one action, and this action is going to both assign a task and wait for the whole process to be completed. Now, where you can find those tasks which have been assigned to you, or that you have sent to, or you have assigned to anyone, or those tasks that you have completed? Well, basically, in every environment, if you go to Power Automate and then under action items, you can find this section called approvals. And here you can find 3 tabs. So first are the tasks that you have received, so tasks which have been assigned to you by someone else. And then under the second tab called send, you'll find all those tasks that you have assigned to someone else. And under history, you will find all the tasks that you have been assigned and that are completed or canceled. So here you can find the whole history of the tasks that you have been somehow working with. The second option is to go into Microsoft Teams and to add this new approvals application. So it's called approvals. You can pin it to your applications. And here you as well have 2 tabs. You have tab with received tasks, where you can find all the tasks that have been assigned to you together with those that have been already completed or canceled. So to filter, you can use this functionality here to filter tasks that you want to see, for example, only tasks that are still pending for your approval. And under send, obviously, you will find all these tasks which you have assigned to someone else. And what is important, both in Power Automate and in Microsoft Teams, you have to switch the environment. So here in Power Automate, you need to switch here the environment. In Microsoft Teams, you have an option here to switch an environment. So if you have tasks assigned on different environment and you want to see them, you need to change it. All right, so speaking about that, let me just show you how it works in real life. So as said, I have here in my Power Automate portal in environment controls default, several tasks that I have assigned to Adele. If I switch to, for example, retail environment, there I can see nothing under my approvals. So there is nothing that I have sent nor received. So I'll just go back to Contoso. And also what I can see is that I as well have created a task that has been sent to Adele. And under history, I do have information about all these tasks which I've been assigned. So for example, this was a task that Adele has requested. And I can see here that I have responded with outcome approved on May 11, And so that is my history of approvals. Now, note one thing, that those approvals are actually never being removed. So they are just stored in tables, but they're not being removed by any retention policies. So whatever has been created, you will find it here after even months or years. Now, the second approach, as I mentioned, is that you can go under Microsoft Teams and then into approvals. And then in approvals, you will see as well all these tasks which have been assigned to you and those that you have already completed. But here you are able to filter. So I can just display myself those which are still pending my approval. The interface is a bit different, it's like more rich, more attractive, because in Power Automate, this interface for a task is rather rough. I don't like it very much. In Microsoft Teams, though, it's more advanced. It shows you like this graphical graph, like who has created, to whom it was assigned. So if there were more assignees, they would be as well mentioned here. Also, this reassign interface is much better. And then if you go into the tasks which have been completed, this information here is also like more informative as to the one that we can find in Power Automate. So again, here I can see the outcome of the task, when it was actually completed, and so on. And as said, if you'd like to see tasks from different environment, you can as well switch here to those environments. And if there are any tasks, well, you'll see them. If they are not, as in my case, then you'll just see a blank screen. I will be back to approvals in Microsoft Teams in a moment. So right now, if there are any questions, please write them in a chat window. If not, I have a challenge for you. And this is something that we are going to, you are going to be challenged every time we complete a section. So the idea I had is that you simply try to answer these questions on your own. Usually those answers are, those questions are single options. So there is just one answer correct. So I'll give you like a minute, maybe two, max two. And then you can just write down in the chat window how many points you had, like count 1 point for every correct answer. Now, how will I get you the correct answers? Everyone ready? I know it's 2 minutes, but we don't have so much time.
People will be shy. I'll say I got 0. So everybody who gets more points than that, you can say don't be ashamed.
All right. So the answer to the first question: in which table are stored single approval requests? Who knows? This is a table where like actually every single task that is created in a approval process is being stored.
Someone's typing, so let's wait. All right. Mala says approval request. Then okay, we can do one question at a time.
Mala has broken bank, and yeah, you're right, buddy. All the answers are correct. Environment rated, yes. But not only because, all right, so yes, in the first question, the correct answer is approve requests, obviously, because this is where all those single tasks are being stored and kept. Where a task can be created, yes, all above. Now, how many actions around approvals are in Power Automate? There are 3, right? One is for assigning, the other one is to assign and wait, and the third one is just to wait. And then speaking about the fourth question, well, actually, there is more than one answer correct. So what is true about the tasks? Yes, they are environment related. That's correct. To create them, you don't have to need premium license. That is correct as well. So that is one of those examples that a feature in Power Automate uses Dataverse, but as long as you don't want to actually access the raw data just to create tasks and use them in your Power Automate workflows, you don't have to use the premium license. You can just rely on the license that is called a seeded one. So it's coming from, for example, SharePoint or Microsoft Teams license. And they can be assigned by email. That is tricky. You know, you can create always a workflow that is being triggered by a new email, and then this sent email is actually creating a task. So there is not directly a button in Outlook that allows you to create a task from the UI of Outlook, but you can create a workflow that is triggered by a new email, for example, and that creates a task. So sort of all three answers are correct in that case. All right. If there are no questions, I don't see any, then I'll just jump over to the second section, the second part. So the types of approvals. All right. So if we were in a single room, I would be definitely asking a lot of questions and counting that someone would answer them verbally. But I don't know if this is possible today, but I wanted to ask if anyone knows already how many types of approvals we have in Power Automate. All right, there are four, right? There are four types of approvals. So first, we have the approve reject, where everyone must approve. The second one is approve reject when only first person has to approve, like first person actually completes the approval process. And then we have the same for custom responses. Those custom responses are really a cool functionality because this allows you to create your approval process, or it's not approval anymore, right? If there is no approval outcome. However, with the responses, you can create like an action that waits for reviewed outcome, or you have like 3 options to choose from, or 4, and so on. Now, the difference between everyone must approve and first to respond, obviously, is that if you decide to have an approval process where you want to assign a task to like 5 employees, and then you want to wait for every response, it is creating a sort of a bottleneck, because then your workflow is not going to resume until every of those 5 employees completes their task. So instead, you can use like first to respond, and then even if you assign a single task to 5 employees, the workflow will continue after just like first person from them completes their task. So it's much safer or more flexible. Now, speaking about the regular approval configuration. So once you create this approval action, then you have to create actually or fill in actually just 3 fields. So first, the basic one is you have to choose this approval type. Then you need to provide a title and define to whom it is assigned. And as said, there can be a single approver, or there can be multiple approvals or assignees, and that's up to you. Now, one very important thing around the approvals is that you can create this description. So it's called details. So you can write down here the description. However, unfortunately, it does not support HTML notation. So if you'd like to have these details written in like a more rich text, with bolds, with lists, with hyperlinks, with, I don't know, italic, and so on, then the only way to do that is to use the markdown notation. It's not very intuitive, and using it sometimes breaks your contents. Nevertheless, if you'd like to experiment with those markdown notations, there is a hyperlink called aka.ms approval details. And under this hyperlink, you will find all those possibilities that you can use, or those markdown notation notes, not notes, whatever, how you can use markdown notation in details. Now, the next thing that you can use is to provide the link and description to the item that is being reviewed or approved. So for example, if you're creating an approval around SharePoint list item, here you can create or insert a link to that item so that the approver is able to simply navigate to that item and see its details. Also, despite the fact that the workflow by default is going to use as a requester, so the person who creates a task, the one who created the workflow, so the one who actually authorized the action, but you can as well define a custom requester. So this person defined here is going to be displayed as the person who requested this approval. Now, there are also 2 options that you can configure. So you can as well set that workflow should send notifications to email and should allow reassignment of this task to someone else. and attachments. So you can create multiple attachments. Now, speaking about the custom approvals or the custom outcomes, here you can define, apart from those two mandatory fields, so the title and assign to, you can as well define your own outcomes. And then you can have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's up to you how many you would like to have. Although, obviously, the more you have, the less what? The harder it is to read that task by the assignee. So the more options you decide to put, it is really getting difficult to understand what you should click in the end. Now, also what is important is this custom, the approval advanced configuration. So I will be talking about that as well in the patterns. But once you switch into settings of an approval action, you will find a couple of options. So let's say the secure inputs and secure outputs, those are the security configurations that will prevent anyone from seeing details of data passed into an action and that the action is returning. So if this is turned on and if someone opens workflow history, then the action will display no details about what was coming into the action and what was outcomes. Then I'll just switch through that because those are actually not being used when speaking about the approvals. And then I want to as well talk about the timeout and retry policy. So the timeout defines how long should the action wait for the outcome. So how long should it wait until it is completed? By default, it is 30 days, and you can say it should be shorter. It cannot be longer because there is this Power Automate limitation, but it can be shorter. Why? You will learn that in the patterns section. And then the retry policy is used every time there is any kind of an error when assigning a task. So if Power Automate is unable to assign a task, it will be trying to retrieve assigning a task until it reaches the policy limits and then fail. All right, so with that said, let me just jump on to the demo again. So I'll just, not Teams, sorry, my bad. I'll just create a task. Let's say it's gonna be just and with this trigger. And as said, we're going to use this approval. So first, I'll just create an approval. And let's say I want to use these custom responses and wait just for the first response. And define two outcomes. That will be assigned to Adele Vance, because that's the person whose account I have in a separate window. Now, when I go into aka.ms approval details, that's the site, the page in docs that I mentioned. So you can see there is a set of markdown properties. Some of them are not supported by every Outlook client. So just be sure you are using those which are really safe for your scenario. And for example, if you'd like to use headers, you need to use those hashes. If you'd like to use bullet points, there is also some kind of notation like that's ordered list. The unordered is just the dashes. So with that, you can actually try to create some kind of rich content in the approval. So for example, if I like to say, that should be now displayed as H2 header. I won't use the link because I don't have any, but I can, for example, define that the initiator is, the requester is not going to be me, but someone else, but I have no idea what other accounts I do have in that tenant. So Adele cannot assign tasks to herself. Okay, I give up. I'll just use myself. Now, with enable notifications and reassignment, you will notice that Adele is going to be able to, first, she's going to receive notification to her email, but as well, she is going to be able to reassign that task to someone else. So that's it. I'll just save this task. Oh, and one more thing around this advanced configuration. So if you click this ellipsis icon, here you have the settings, and under settings, this is where you can define the timeout. So how long the action should wait for the approval to be completed, and how should look like the retry policy. Right, the question around the timeouts. So the example is P1D. That means that the action is, I mean, this action won't wait because this action only creates an approval and does nothing else. Maybe I'll just use another one. So the wait for approval. Here I need to provide the approval ID so that it is going to wait for that approval. And now this action, the wait for approval, by default, it waits 30 days. However, if I write P1D, that will mean this action is only going to wait 1 day for the approval to be completed. After 1 day, it will time out. And if there is no handling in Power Automate for this action, if this action is timed out, then the workflow is going to fail. If I'd like to define 5 days, it's just P5 day. Now, I have added here this hyperlink that is navigating you to documentation for ISO 8601 around duration. So you can just write it down. And this hyperlink actually opens. Yep, does it open? Yeah, it does. So it opens the website that is actually defining how this notation how it should be used. So in Power Automate, we're not using years or months or weeks. We're just using date and time. So in our case, if you would like to, for example, define that something is waiting 1 day and 1 day and, for example, 5 hours, this is how it should look like. So this defines that the timeout is going to be 1 day and 5 hours. Sorry, there is just one more thing to be added. You have to add T between. So P is like period and then time for the time. So this notation, this thing should define or should set up this action to wait for only 1 day and 5 hours. All right. So once again, if you'd like to write it down, I cannot copy it. Oh, come on, not yet. So that's the link. Okay, any questions to this part, to this piece of?
There are a couple of questions in the chat window.
Right. Frin asking in what real life scenario would you want your process to terminate before 30 days, and what benefit does this have on your environment, and if any? Right. So the point around the timeouts is, for example, if you have an assignee that is, I know, like a very busy manager, and you have a workflow that really requires an approval in a few days timeout. And so you know that this manager like very unlikely answers within those days. So you assume that that person has like only 5 days for approval. And after those 5 days, this task is being timeout and is being escalated to whatever senior manager. And then that person is going to take over the approval. So that is an example that I have in my mind that I've been using quite often. And this is also one of the patterns I will show you later. So just don't just spoil. There are scenarios that you would like your approval to like last less than 30 days. Okay, so just a short test that you can now answer to those questions. Now, those are there is only one answer correct. Oh gosh, it's already 20 minutes to 9. Okay, so I will just do that for you. First, how many types of approvals are in Power Automate? Well, obviously there are 4, right? So first with the approve, reject everyone, and just the first approver approves, and as well 2 for custom responses as well. Everyone must approve, and just a single person has to approve. So that 4 is correct. Now, can you assign a task to multiple assignees? Obviously, yes. What are the possible outcomes of task approval? Approve, reject, custom, defined by designer, all above. Obviously, all above, because you can both use the predefined outcomes, approve, reject, and define those on your own. Now, what standard is used to define timeouts in Power Automate? That is ISO 8601. 9000 is quality, and 4217 is, I have no idea what for, but I just put it. So 8601 is the one used to define time and duration. All right. With that, let's move on to approval in Teams. So basically, in Power Automate, we are able to create an approval for Microsoft Teams, not only in Microsoft Teams. So by using this action that is called post adaptive card in a chat or channel, and then we use this option to post as a flowbot, and then to post in a chat with a flowbot with a specific person, one of the outcomes of those dynamic outcomes from the action called create an approval is the one that is called Teams adaptive card. So if you put this thing in here in adaptive card, you will be simply sending an adaptive card to approver in Microsoft Teams private conversation. So that is one option, how you can extend approvals to Microsoft Teams, how you can actually work with tasks in Microsoft Teams. The other option is to go directly into Microsoft Teams, as I mentioned, into conversation, either private or channel. And there is this small icon here that looks like a workflow from SharePoint 2010. And when you click it, there is this dialog going to be opened that allows you to either create a new request, just a default one, or to use one from the templates. What are templates? I will tell you in a moment. And so here you can define to whom you want to assign this task, as well if you want to have all employees, all assignees to respond, or just the first person. And there is also some more configuration that I will show you once I go into Teams. Now, if you want to see your tasks, and if you want to create a new approval, you can as well go into Approvals application. And here you have this new approval request button that if you click, you are also able to create a draft approval, or you can create an approval from a template. And that's it. So with that, I'll just jump on to the Microsoft Teams again. All right. So here I have this Power Automate that actually has the configuration I showed you before. So first I have created an approval for Adele Vance. Here I as well added this post adaptive card in chat or channel action, and I put here this Teams adaptive card dynamic outcome. So that's the one. And then I as well chose to wait for approval. Now, once I hit to test it and run, you see that right now the task is created. Now the action that the adaptive card has been sent, now the workflow is actually waiting for an approval. So what Adele can do, she can go into her into her Microsoft Teams, to her conversation, and this is the adaptive card sent by the bot. I don't know if you like it. I personally don't like it. I hate this large logo of approvals, but whatever. We cannot customize it. And then here she is able to approve or reject. So together with comments and simply complete it. And now once she completes that adaptive card in here in Microsoft Teams, not only this Power Automate that was waiting has completed the wait, so can continue its logic, but as well that that email that Adele has received. So that's an email with adaptive card as well, or with actionable message. And this message has also been, as you can see, refreshed because Adele completed her approval in Teams. Therefore, the same approval in Outlook is already closed. I don't have any opened yet, so I should just assign another one. So this is how you can actually post an adaptive card task from Power Automate to Microsoft Teams, and as well have this approval process to be, like, say, conducted not only in Power Automate portal, not only over emails, but as well using using Microsoft Teams. Now, what can as well be done is, as I mentioned, you can go here in this new conversation, and you can hit here the button approvals, which will trigger the new approval to be created. And as well as said, you can create either basic or e-sign. The e-sign is using Adobe Sign technology to route documents between approvers and digitally sign them. It requires additional license from Adobe, so I don't have it here. I cannot show you. The basic one is just a simple approval that you can define the approvers. You can define if you'd like to have answers from all the recipients. You can as well add attachments. You can as well provide custom responses, so not approve, reject, but your own. And what is important is that not here, but if you were creating this task inside approvals application, you would be as well able to send this approval to a different environment to the one where you are creating it. So let me just go here to approvals. So if I create this new approval right from here, I would be able to send this approval to a different environment, right? So here I can just select environment where I'd like to send this approval. Now, one different thing is that you can as well use a feature called templates. With templates, you can, like the Microsoft Teams admin can create templates either for organization. Let me just show you. You can manage templates as the Microsoft Teams admin, and then you can create a template that is either dedicated for a team or for organization or for specific people. Now, what is the point of those custom templates? Well, the idea here is that you simply create a template of a task that that is used to. Now, what I haven't? Oh, the template name. That is used to conduct or process employees through creation of specific types of requests. So, for example, with that, you can create a leave request or business travel requests, or like, for example, order of a meal, like if you like to order a lunch. So you can just define your own form. Let's say so you can have like options, you can have a date, you can have a text as well. And with these questions, you can then gather information from the user, which are then going to be sent to approvers. What is also important, you can define if you'd like the files to be attached, and also what kind of approvers. So either a requester can put them manually, or you can specify specific approvers. And again, those people can be fixed for the template, or there was an option to as well use manager, but I don't see it here. All right. Okay, so there was also an option to have a manager to be selected as the approver, but I don't see it right now. Maybe I'm just missing something. And again, you can have custom responses or just the regular ones. So now once you have it, then just publish it and then switch to Adele. So now Adele can actually go here to tasks, then switch to templates. And here she sees all those templates which are either selected for organization or for the team that she is a member of, or for her exclusively. So that's a simple activity task that I have just created. And this should now open the template, but it doesn't. That's a good question. Why? Anyway, let's try it this way. So here are the templates, sample activity. Okay, now it works. Maybe there had to be something refreshed or whatever. So with that, she can define her own name of request. She cannot change approvers. Now she has to answer to those specific questions. I mean, I haven't marked them as mandatory, so they're all optional, but well, she can just provide some information and that's it. Now she sends it, and actually more administrator, so like myself, I will receive this new task. And in here, I can see all this information that Adele has provided or filled in. And well, I know that's a sample activity task that is requested, the information from Adele, and I can approve, reject, reassign. I can as well provide some comments. So for approval or for rejection, and with that, Adele will know my as well information sent to her along with my decision. So this is how we can actually create and work with approvals in Microsoft Teams. So apart from having an approval initiated and created by my Power Automate as a part of a larger workflow, as a larger logic, you can as well create those single approvals straight from Microsoft Teams that are just living within this Microsoft Teams application and can be completed or, well, accessed and completed directly in Microsoft Teams. So this is how it works. There was a question around if only admin can create a template. Yes, so the templates can be created by Microsoft Teams admins, as far I know. I mean, those organization-wide, definitely. The ones that are created for team possibly can as well be created by the specific team's owners. That I haven't checked, to be honest. Definitely not regular users are allowed to create templates. All right. So with that, let's jump to the test. So a couple of moments. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. All right, this time the answers are as well multi-option. So there are questions where not only one answer is correct. Okay, so I'll go through them right now. First, where can you find tasks? Assign tasks, obviously. In action items inside Power Automate portal, yes, that is correct. In approvals application inside Microsoft Teams, that is correct as well. In to-do application, and that is not correct because in to-do, you can find tasks that are coming from either your flagged email or the tasks that you have created yourself in to-do, or the tasks that have been assigned to you in Microsoft Planner. However, the tasks that are coming from approvals are not integrated with to-do, unfortunately. All right, what scope tasks templates can have? Organization-wide, of course. Team-wide, yes. Specific people, sure. So the three actions are correct. I think it really fulfills all possible scopes that you can even think of. Now, what is Adobe Sign? It's a platform for digital signing documents and their routing, an application for graphics designing, or a new type of road sign. Well, when I was studying, there was always, I mean, everyone was saying always that if you have a question or if you have a test, then always the answer that is the longest one has to be the correct one. So that is actually correct in this case. So Adobe Sign is a platform for digital signing documents and their routing. Now, last question, is it possible to create a task in a different environment to the one where it is being created? And the answer is yes, it is possible with Microsoft Teams. So with Power Automate, you are not able to create a task in a different environment as the one where you are designing your workflow. But in Microsoft Teams, you saw that there was this drop down that allows you to create a task in a different environment. Okay, no question. So now, right now, I'd like to go through some patterns that will help you build long-running approvals. So now, one important thing, I just want to underline it and remind you this once again, is that in Power Automate, if we have actions that are waiting for something like approvals action waiting for outcomes, or an action that sends adaptive card to Microsoft Teams and is waiting for the response, or delay action. So any action is actually pausing Power Automate engine for some time until something happens, cannot wait longer than 30 days, because after these 30 days, it is being timed out. And as said, if the workflow has no support, no handling for this scenario, then the whole workflow is failing and is completing with the outcome that it failed. So keep in mind that you just cannot create, like, from out of box workflows that are running for more than 30 calendar days. But there are couple of patterns, and you can be creative to create your own ideas, to create your own solutions that allows you to have those workflows run even years, actually. All right, so the first one is something that I've been talking about in regards to following question. So, like, why would we like to have a workflow that is, or a task that is running less than 30 days? Well, basically, this is because we sometimes might have tasks which are very urgent, and we don't want the workflow to really wait like 30 days until the task is completed. But we can define the timeout of this single task like 2 days, and then have this parallel branch where one of the branches, so in my case, this one, is going to be completed or is going to be executed if there is no error in the assign initial task action. So if this task is completed within the time, then workflow is going to use that branch. However, if the initial action, so if the task action times out, then the workflow would go to the second branch, so to the escalation. So in this case, I need to configure the escalation settings, the run after settings, that this should only be executed if the initial task action times out, right? So this action is going only to run if this task times out. And then, for example, I can assign a new task to line manager, any other person that can replace the original assignee. Simply have some kind of a logic that pushes the workflow to the completion, even though the first assigned task action was timed out because there was no response within the set time. So that is one of the examples how you can deal with the longer running workflows. Also, you can as well just define this kind of pattern and simply leave the 30 days, this default configuration. And so even here, after the 30 days, the workflow is not going to fail. But if this action is not completed in 30 days, then there is a new task being created to another assignee so that the workflow can wait another 30 days for another response. All right, so that is one of the patterns that you can actually use to have longer running workflows. Another one is the one that I'm actually quite often using. So using child flows, not child flows, but let's say it's not a child flow in the meaning of child flows in Power Automate, but having like a parent workflow that assigns a task, and then another workflow that is actually handling the approval. So the idea here is that first, we do not need a premium license because we are just using SharePoint. And then the pattern works like that. At first we are creating an approval. So here the parent workflow is just creating an approval and then is writing these approval details in a SharePoint list. So in that SharePoint list, it is writing the ID of an approval and some other information that we might need for the business logic in the handler workflow, so-called. Also, what is important, we have a status column in that list, in that SharePoint list, that has like 3 outcomes or even 4 outcomes. The first one is like initiated, timed out, completed, and whatever you want else. The point is that when the first workflow is creating this item, it is using the status initiated. And then we have a second workflow that is being triggered every time a new item on that list is created or modified. There is an error. There should be like when an item is created or modified. Now, what is important is that this trigger has defined trigger conditions that actually triggers this workflow only if the status or the title, whatever column, has a value timeout, or it is not visible here, but it's timeout or initiated. That means this handler workflow will be triggered in just 2 cases, either when a new task is created or the existing task has timed out. And now the idea is that this second workflow is actually waiting for the approval. And then here again, we have this pattern with parallel branch. So if the task times out, if it is not completed within 30 days, then workflow creates or changes the status in that SharePoint item and marks its status as timed out. This is then triggering the workflow again. And again, the workflow is waiting for an approval, right? So then this can simply happen like over and over again. Now, in case this approval is completed, then it goes into this branch that it marks this approval in SharePoint as completed. And then you can have the longer logic of whatever should happen after that approval is completed. And with that, you can actually have this workflow really running endlessly because every time the task is timed out, you can like re-trigger creation of this task and have it wait another 30 days and another 30 days and another 30 days until forever. So this is the idea of using SharePoint in that pattern. And also, Andre, it's not just there's just a question in chat. What is this extension magnifier? It's not extension. It's Logitech presenter, and it has this feature. It's just an application from Logitech that actually does this trick. So it's from that thing. Okay, and then last pattern that I'm as well using quite often, that one actually requires you to have premium license, is to use Dataverse. So I showed you that every request, every actually task is being stored in Dataverse. So here the idea is that we create one workflow that actually creates an approval. And again, we can have like another Dataverse table that we are going to use to store information, that the context of the approval. So that like we know that for this particular workflow, we're only looking at this task with that ID, because, well, in the approval table, obviously we have hundreds of other tasks and they can be coming from different workflows and so on. And then the idea is that we have a second workflow that is being triggered anytime, every time there is a new row added, modified, not deleted. Deleted is not necessary, but the point is that every time the row is added or modified in Dataverse in a table that is called, sorry, I haven't expanded it. In a table that is called approval response, right? So the point is that this workflow creates approval request. Those tasks are assigned to users. They can access them through email. They can access them through action items or in Microsoft Teams. And these tasks will be there for years. They can complete them anytime they want. And then the other logic, the end of the business logic, is actually stored in a second workflow that is being triggered every time the task is completed. So every time there is a new item created in approval response table. So then we are getting the ID of that approval response. We can then examine it against, for example, the ID of the approval that to check if this is the task that is coming from our workflow or from another workflow. And if yes, if this is coming from our workflow, then we can as well check what is the outcome of that approval response. And then depending on the approval response, either to handle rejection or approval or any kind of other business logic. The general idea here is that we really have, with that approach, an ability to have this workflow not running, but waiting for a response even years. The point is that this one ends and the other one starts only when the task is completed. Yeah, possibly. Thank you. Thank you, Victor. All right. So as said, you can just be creative and simply follow any of those patterns and extend them or create your own. The point is only to, like, generally speaking, to have like one workflow that is responsible for assigning a task and other workflow or workflows that are responsible for handling the outcomes or the task completion or the fact that the task is timed out. And then you can use Dataverse, you can use SQL, you can use Excel, you can use Microsoft Lists, like whatever you want to store this context information and then have another workflow that is going to use them, examine them if this activity is coming from the task initiated by the first workflow, and then handle the rest of the business logic. So you can either use the free approach or the premium approach. Just be creative. Okay, so again, the test. First, how many days will Power Automate wait for approval? We have, oh, wow, we are just out of time. So it's just 30 days, right? To use Dataverse Actions, you need a premium license, yes or no? Of course, yes, Dataverse is premium. What other than Dataverse can be used to create long-running approvals? SharePoint, sure. Excel, yes. Microsoft Lists as well. Why should we even bother about long-running approvals? This is where I wanted to have an open discussion with you, but because we're just over the time, I think I have answered this already, right? Because that's very rare that business is completing their approvals within the time we want them to complete. Right, and then last and least, administration. Now, what I'm going to show you actually requires premium license. And the point is that you want sometimes to access raw data. For example, when you want to change something in existing task, or when you want to delete an existing task, or reassign a task, or cancel a task. In any of these scenarios, when you don't have an access to the task as an assignee, you might need to access this through Dataverse directly. So to access raw data and to be able to somehow modify this raw data, you have to go into tables in Dataverse, then switch the view to all from default. And then you will find these tables that are actually being used in approval. So the approvals, approval requests, and approval response. Then what you have to do in the table of your choice, you need to go under the data and then edit data in Excel. So this is where you will able to simply display the contents of a specific table in Excel. And here you can as well able to modify this information. So you can update statuses, you can create new rows, you can modify existing information. Sorry, the point is that once you're done with your work, and you have to be very careful, the last thing you have to do is to hit the publish button here so that your changes are going to be sent to Dataverse. All right, so just a few information around this activities, like what happens when. So first, when a task is created, there is a new entry added to approvals. Results are empty, stage is set to basic, status to active, status recent to pending. And also there is a new entry created in approval requests for every assignee. So if you have two assignees, there are going to be two entries created in approval request. If you have one, just one. Each entry has the status set to active, status reason as well active, and owner is the person who is an assignee. All right, so this is what happens if a task is created. Now, when a task is completed, what happens? First, this original entry in approval request, it's, the original entry, the result is set to outcome, the stage is set to complete, the status is set to inactive, and the status reason is marked as complete. So this is what happens in approval request. Now, in approval response, there is new entry created. The value of the response column is set to outcome, so like approve, reject, or the custom outcome. Status is set to inactive, and status reason is set to committed. So these two events are happening in approval request and approval response tables. Sorry, in approval and approval response tables. My bad. Now, what happens if a task is reassigned? This is also very important. Well, in approval request table, the status reason of the original entry is marked as reassigned and status is inactive. And also there is a new entry created in approval request that has the reassigned from and reassigned from index set to values, to IDs of the original entry in approval request. So this information is being updated in approval request table. However, if you are reassigning, then you have to as well be aware about specific principles that you have to follow. So first, user is not able to assign tasks to themselves. As well, when they are reassigning, they cannot reassign a task to themselves. They cannot reassign a task that is not assigned to them. And lastly, it is not possible to reassign a task to the creator, so to the initiator. Obviously, when you're going to use Dataverse and Excel to edit raw data, you can do with those tasks anything you want. So you can even reassign the task to the owner or to yourself. However, if you'd like to do that through the interface, this is not something you can do. And lastly, what is happening when a task is canceled? So when a task is canceled, the original entry, so the approval request entry, is marked, the result is marked as canceled. Sorry, in approval, that happens in approval table. So the result is set to cancelled, stage to complete, status to inactive, and status reason to cancelled. And well, that's it actually. As we don't have enough time, I'm not going to jump to Excel, but there is really nothing to be shown. So I'll just jump to the final test. All right, so which table I used to when a task is created? Only two. So obviously the approval and approval request. Now what happens to a task when it is cancelled? The correct answer is that it's marked as cancelled and set as inactive in Dataverse. How can you access raw data? Obviously through Microsoft Excel. And who can reassign a task? Person who created the task? No. Assign you the task? Yes. And Power Platform admin? Well, yes, through Microsoft Excel as well. All right. So I hope that you really enjoyed this presentation and the information I share with you, and that those tests somehow helped you to memorize what you learned. So as said, the demos were all the time with us, right? True. And well, yeah, with that, I'd like just to say thank you very much for your presence and listening. I wish we had this kind of session in person, as I believe we would have better interaction and I would really be able to ask you questions verbally and you would be able to as well answer those verbally. Nevertheless, if you have any questions to this session, reach me out either through my email or through lks.ms/Poszitek. So that happening here. And as well, we are going to see each other in a week. where I will be talking about debugging and error handling in Power Automate.
This is incredible, Thomas. Thank you. As we say it back home, we say it, there is a lot of meat in this soup.
Yep. I mean,
Just a lot of content.
this can be even longer. I can talk about those approvals even for 2 hours, I guess, with proper demos and interaction, because really this is a long topic and a very important one. It has many
Yes.
different views and angles that you can show it.
Yep. So I put in your link tree here as well, and a few other links from your for your social networks. Folks can reach out to you, of course, using the short link here, aka.ms also works. Yeah, connect with Thomas, sign up, subscribe to his channel. It's there's a lot of content there. I am looking forward to next week already because one of the areas that I struggle the most is organizing my flows in a way that you can actually read. You know, it's very hard if you have. I do have big screens, but even then, if the flow is doing more than it should, then you can get lost pretty quickly. So I'm looking forward to see a strategy on debugging, error handling, and overall just organization of flows so that it's readable and manageable. I think. I mean,
I'm not going to talk about organization of flows, but
well,
maybe yeah, I will be able
yeah.
to
I
answer
mean,
the questions.
I saw the content for debugging and error handling. I think that in itself, I mean, for me personally, it's gonna help me organize my flows better. I think because a lot of times you just resort to the task at hand, right? I want to test this or I want to create this record, and then you just create something big. And for you to organize air handling across multiple tasks like that can be troublesome. So I'll follow silently and learn from
Okay.
the superhero.
So my tip for better organization of your flows is that I often create a separate solutions per each group of flows that are just serving the same business logic. So I just don't keep them in under my flows. I just put them in solutions, and so I have I group them there, and it helps you to keep them organized.
Awesome. All right.
All right.
Can't wait to see it next week. Well, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. Thomas, again, thank you for dedicating time to this, and we'll see you in a week. Take care, my friend.
Yep.
Bye
Have a great
bye.
day. Thank you.